Good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to today's Webcafe session. This is a part of Women in AI campaign under the ELOQUENCE project, but in collaboration with TrustLLM, our sister project. We are delighted to have you all here to explore the incredible contributions of women who are in mainly man world of AI. And today's session is special as it combines the informal and conversational spirit of Webcafe with the opportunity to learn from our valuable guest, Saskia Lensink. Saskia is consultant AI at the Netherlands Organization for Applied Scientific Research. She is specialized in the language and speech technologies, and she also applies her deep expertise in the natural language processing and automatic speech recognition to advance the projects like GPT-NL, a sovereign Dutch alternative to big tech language models, and TrustLLM, as I mentioned, the Horizon project that is focused on building ethical, trustworthy, and trustworthy AI for Europe. Beyond her technical achievements, Saskia is also an advocate for diversity and inclusion in technology, making her a perfect guest for this campaign and session. So over the next few minutes, we will hear more about Saskia's journey, her work, and her vision about the future of AI. You will also have a chance to ask questions via the Q&A box, and also via raising the hands, and I will give you the opportunity to have the mics on. So thank you for joining once again, and let's start with a conversation with the Webcafe. So Saskia, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Ivana, for the invitation and the opportunity to be part of this Webcafe. It's the first time for me to be part of a Women in AI event. So it's really nice to be part of that because indeed there's not a lot of ladies in the field of AI. We also see it at TNL where I work. So that's the abbreviation for the very long name that we have, the Netherlands Research Organization.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I find it a very nice field, and there's lots of opportunities. And I think it's really nice to have a very diverse set of voices heard in that field, and not just from women as myself, but also women from an international maybe outside of Europe background, and also different ages. I think is a very important aspect because we tend to be with a very young population and with very senior people, but also the middle layer oftentimes is lacking. So we think we still have a lot to gain in terms of diversity and inclusion. But that's why it's so nice to give it a little bit more attention and really focus our attention towards that to make it happen.
I agree with you. And thank you for the participation. We'll start with the questions. Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey into the field of AI, and what exactly inspired you to specialize in language and speech technologies?
And so it's been quite a journey, I should say, because I initially started as a linguist. And even before that, I started as someone who really liked languages. I was always fascinated by the idea that people speak different languages, that you can learn different languages and communicate with each other, but you're never going to be able to speak a language like a native speaker unless you've learned it as a very small child. But that's just a fascinating idea for me. And there are so many different languages in the world with very different structures, and I was always fascinated, always wanted to learn more languages, listen to recordings of languages that were out of this world for myself. And that was always so interesting. And I just couldn't choose when I wanted to go to college, to university. I couldn't choose whether I wanted to study Chinese, Mandarin, or focus on Japanese, or maybe improve my German, or maybe even study, I don't know, Swedish, also an option in the Netherlands. So I couldn't choose, and then I discovered there's these studies called linguistics where you can basically study them all without having to study, without having to choose for a single language, and really study how different languages evolved over time, how they are represented in the brain, how they can even be put into computers. And that really sparked my interest in, hey, wait a minute, you can also put languages into computers. What's this? Hey, you can transform them into numbers and perform calculations over them. There's something called transitional probabilities. So what's this? I found it really, really fascinating. And along the way during my studies, I discovered that it's not just the language part of it, but especially the psychological part, but even
Mhm.
more the computational part of linguistics is absolutely fascinating. And it's just so interesting to see that there's a lot of structure behind something that feels very unstructured, but at the same time, it's a very complex system. So that really fascinated me. And during my PhD, I really enhanced my skills in statistical modeling, in programming. I really wanted to learn how to get these transitional probabilities into something that works. I really wanted to understand how you can get a language into a computer. So there I started to increase my skills in that field. I've never really felt like a true scientist in the field of quantitative methods, but
But
still
you
I've
are.
been employing them for many years. But yeah, really, after this PhD, I felt like it's time to zoom out a bit more and instead of doing statistical modeling, reframe it as machine learning, since the outside world seems to call it that way. And then suddenly there's a whole lot of job opportunities where you can work as something that's called a data scientist. Okay, let's try that. So after my PhD, I transferred to a commercial company as a data scientist. I've been involved in all kinds of projects where we modeled traffic lights, for example.
Mhm.
There's a whole system behind those, the optimization of those, traffic management. That was super interesting, but at the same time, deep learning was making its entryway in linguistics and especially with natural language processing, but also in speech technology. There was an introduction of deep learning, a combination of deep learning and these technologies, and it's just booming. There was lots of things happening. Transformers were there. We got really interesting progress, and I really felt like I wanted to go back to language and speech technologies. And that was the moment when TNO was looking for someone who wanted to do research into these technologies and also perform some consultancy over them and really be in the middle of, on the one hand, academia, research institutes, but also industry and people outside. So that was a golden opportunity for me to jump into that field. And I've been with TNO for many years now, or many years, 5 years, but it feels like an eternity. And have been involved in very interesting projects where I could really marry this interest for quantitative methods, on the other hand, industry, business, but also the research. Especially after ChatGPT, the interest in this field has boomed. So it's
Mhm.
a very exciting time to be working in the field of languages and computers.
Yes, definitely, and definitely with your background, as you're mixing everything. So, as you mentioned that you're working for TNEO now, and you're focusing on NLP and ACR. Could you give us an overview of what a typical day looks like in your role?
A lot of talking. That is a bit of a silly answer, but that's there is a lot to talk about,
Mhm.
especially now. Suddenly, there's a huge boom and increase in interest in what generative AI could do, and
Mhm.
generative AI is, and especially language models, are a subfield of AI. There is a very large interest. There's like a spotlight on these technologies specifically, but also because of the hype, suddenly everybody considers themselves an expert. So
Yeah.
there is a lot of talking going on, a lot of expectations or a lot of fear. And
Mhm.
whenever there's very high expectations or a lot of fear, it means that people might not have a very realistic view on what these technologies can and cannot do. And we're still discovering this, right? It's still kind of a big open question how valuable they will turn out to be in the long run, but they will have a definitely are going to have a very big impact on our lives no matter what. And
Mhm.
it really requires a lot of talking to understand what people are worried about, but also what they think could be valuable to their own companies or to their own research institutes. You really want to keep up with the field, so that also requires a lot of talking to many different experts. And at the same time, you also want to progress and go ahead yourself. And we have this very interesting field now where the US is definitely one of the key players in this field, but they have a different approach, so to say, to how they approach legislation, ethical boundaries, concerns regarding privacy, copyrights. Yeah, they approach that in a very different way from the way we like to approach it in Europe. And that makes it interesting because you want to understand what is the difference and what are the consequences of this different approach. So here in Europe, we try to do everything in a trustworthy and ethical way without breaking the law. We want to build lawful models, but that turns out to be quite difficult. And that also requires a lot of talking to, first of all, understand what is the context, so what are the boundaries that we need to take into account, and how are we going to operationalize those boundaries in such a way that we can actually make progress. That's very complicated. So basically, the whole day consists of me talking to many different experts from very different fields, and that's very exciting. So you get very interesting points of view, and not just from the technical experts, but also from psychologists, from legal scholars, from people with a business degree that want to help you create a business case. It's just a super interesting uh,
I
collaboration between many different disciplines.
mhm. I agree, and maybe I will just add that it's super exciting, but on the other hand, it's super exhausting
Mm.
because, as we all know, talking and communication is special skill to know. You're also a product owner of GPT-NL, and could you tell us more about this project, this product? And what it means to be building a sovereign Dutch alternative to big tech's language models.
Yeah, so that project takes up most of my working week. There's another one, TrustLLM Horizon project, where we basically try to do something that is very similar, but on a
Mhm.
larger scale from what we're trying to accomplish with GPT-NL, and that is building a lawful large language model, in this case for the Netherlands, with the Dutch language as its main focus. And building a lawful, trustworthy model sounds simple, but it's in practice really difficult to do because it requires that you understand what lawfulness implies. What do we mean by that? Where do we get our data from? And also all the technical expertise that is needed. You need to build up a lot of additional knowledge there. So that's also with the technical teams, we really try to keep up to date with current developments and try to do it ourselves. And then you also actually see that whenever you try to build something yourself, you learn a lot of new things. If you just look at a scientific paper, you're not going to learn everything that is actually required to do it yourself. So it's also very helpful to be doing that. And I'm also learning all kinds of things about high performance computing and what can go wrong if you try to deploy those systems, and how to approach those and what to do with that.
Yeah, I understand. And with your involvement, as you said, in TrustLLM, it's clear that you're passionate about creating lawful and sovereign and trustworthy AI for Europe. Could you share why this is important and what impact it could have on users?
So it is, first of all, very important that we don't just talk about trustworthy AI or
Mhm.
AI that is in line with our own values and regulations and legislative context, but that we're actually able to build it ourselves. And the only way to do it is by starting to do it. So you want to build up the technical know-how. You want to understand what you need in terms of infrastructure, but also what you need, not just in terms of the technical know-how, but also all the other expertise that is needed to get it off the ground. On the one hand, that implies a lot of legal know-how, and in a field that is currently in a very rapid development as well. You need to understand what you consider to be ethical boundaries and how you make that concrete when you develop something. That's also, it sounds easy, but it's not so easy to have responsible AI in practice.
Yeah,
And
that's
on top of that, what I find really interesting is that we all say that we want to have this alternative for Europe. And indeed, it is very important. But in the end, if you build something that doesn't work or that's not aligned with what potential end users will use the technology for, it's completely useless. So it's really really important to also understand what people would like to use these models for, and when they would like to use a European alternative that might not be as performant as, for example, OpenAI's model or Meta's model, but that might still be very useful for a particular use case that you have in mind. So there within TrustLLM, I lead the work package on use cases, and there we really try to ground large language model development in a real world context. So we really understand, okay, so if you do want to use it within this particular context, what do you need? How do you know if it adds value? What is required? And when do people think it's a success? And hopefully we can bring those insights back into the development of follow-up versions of the model.
Several huge challenges that you're facing, actually. It seems easy, but definitely it's not. You are active in various consortia and networks that promote European LLMs. And how do you see the future of AI in Europe, the innovation sector in Europe, and what steps are needed to ensure Europe remains competitive?
Oof, those are tough questions.
Yeah,
And I
maybe
don't
not
have
for
a
your
clear-cut
face.
answer. But yeah, what we definitely need, of course, is technical experts, which we
Mhm.
seem to have a lot. There is a lot of talent within Europe, a lot of AI talent, and we need to keep them here. And we need to make sure that there's a lot of opportunities for these talents to have interesting work and lots of opportunities, and not just within the context of universities, not just in the context of industry, but the combination. In the end, what you need is a thriving ecosystem.
Mhm.
And a thriving ecosystem not only has the talent, but also the infrastructure. So you need a lot of compute and a lot of energy basically to
Yeah.
make this happen. And there are currently a lot of interesting developments around high performance computing. I think it was the 7th or the 10th of December, there was news on the AI factories for Europe. 7 projects have been granted, and I think these developments are very interesting. Just to see what all the high performance compute centers in Europe
Mhm.
are capable of, and that they're extending their horizons and their compute capabilities, that's a very important step. I think what we are lacking in Europe currently is there is talent, there's interest, there's a lot of research. The compute seems to be growing.
Mhm.
However, what we don't really have is a thriving industry-led ecosystem with regards to AI. So we don't have a lot of AI, or perhaps we don't even have a single AI first company that is thriving.
Mhm. Mhm.
We really need investments from R&D departments of large enterprises, of large companies to support this movement, because we do have a thriving startup scene, but that's not enough. You also need large companies to invest in these technologies, and you really want the markets, you really want the market adoption of these technologies and a market drive and interest in these technologies, because if they're not going to adopt this, it's going to be a very difficult story. So in the end, you need a lot of public-private partnerships. You also want to have industry behind a lot of R&D opportunities. I think that that's a very important aspect that we're currently lacking and can improve upon in Europe.
Yeah, basically the synergy of all stakeholders. And about that and creating the market with its demand, would you mind sharing some insights on how those interested in language models can start or find some opportunities so they can gain the knowledge and then maybe help you out in the business sector?
Well, there are great university programs out there. So if you're still a student, really look out for opportunities within your own university or some universities in Europe. I mean, there's great AI programs, great NLP programs. There's a lot of things happening currently, and lots of studies also integrate generative AI into their curricula. So there seems to be a lot of movement and opportunities and options for you. When it comes to companies, also, we see there is a growing interest in Gen AI and adoption of Gen AI, but also upskilling of their own personnel. So also, if you're interested in upskilling and knowing more about it, really go talk to your supervisor and see what can we come up with such that we grow in our knowledge on this topic and that we can really capitalize on it. If you're working for a research and technology organization such as myself, it's also a very important topic for us, and we're also looking for ways to upgrade our knowledge, to get new projects funded in this field such that we grow our technical know-how. So that's really there. And there's also a lot of online materials. There's great webinars, there's great YouTube channels, podcasts, books. So there's a lot of free material out there as well that you can just ingest and digest and learn a lot from. So that's also a great place to start. And really try to look for opportunities that really fit your field of interest. Because in the end, yeah, we need opportunities, we need investments. I also think what can really benefit Europe as a whole is successful products built on top of these technologies. So not just develop the core foundations on the technologies, not just foundational models, but also what can you do with it? What kind of products can we make on top of it? What kind of businesses can we grow on top of that? So if you have a great business idea, also try to see if you can pitch it somewhere, if you can start a startup. I think these are also very important developments that we need to promote, motivate people to start doing this.
Yeah, definitely. And definitely that's the previous question, synergy with the business and academia. Okay, and you were talking about the ethical part of all of your work. And from your perspective, what does it mean for an AI system to be ethical, and how do you address it in your projects? For those who are not aware about the ethical part, you can explain.
So that's I myself am still learning so much about responsible AI, ethical AI. And I think the short answer is a silly one, namely that an ethical AI system doesn't exist. What makes it ethical is really understanding in what context it will be deployed, by whom, for whom, and who will be also affected by it, and understanding these aspects and having conversations about it, and also understanding that you cannot get it right the first time, the second time, the third time. It really should be an iterative process where you keep challenging each other on, so what are my ethical boundaries? What are the red lines that I see? And what do we find acceptable? And really, that's not so much a technical question, but really a management decision in the end, and then also a decision, an ethical conversation that you should have with your team. And it should really be connected to the real world and the context in which the technology will land, might land, will potentially land. And the further away from a practical application you are, the harder it gets, as you cannot foresee all the potential ways in which technology will be used. So this grounding in the real world is super important if you want to say anything at all about ethical implications and mitigations, or how to mitigate any unethical use of your technology. That's a very complicated topic. And I think in the end, bottom line is that it needs to be a conversation, and you need to understand it's an iterative process that will never end, that will never be done.
Yeah, understand. And very most the last one, since we are under the Women in AI campaign, and we have some women as a participant on this Webcafe. And can you give us advice how other women who are interested in this field can enter? Are they going to face some challenges just because they are women?
So that's so I've been thinking about this question when you asked me for this webinar, and so I'm talking to colleagues, and for me it's a complicated one, because on the one hand, because there is not a lot of women in the field, you tend to
Mm-hmm.
stand out, and there is an increasing interest in building more diverse teams, which makes that even if you're a bit more introvert, there might be a higher chance of somebody pointing out that, hey, we have very talented women here, and they might want to be part of the team. At the same time, women tend to be a bit more humble. So it's also really about having a manager or a mentor or a sponsor that recognizes talent and really pushes you forward and really tells you, well, you can do it. And I think that's an important one, um, to promote and help other women around you, because there is a lot of talent and there is a lot of interest in making teams more diverse and inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
Will is there, but it might be the case that your colleagues are not inclined to step forward themselves. So really look around and try to see, do I see any talents here? Do I see people that might be very talented, but they're not stepping forward themselves because they might be very humble? I think that that's a very important part of it. Sponsor each other, help each other out, and try to ask difficult questions. And
Yeah.
this is something that I've noticed myself, because most of the teams I've been working with had few women. Somehow I've internalized this idea that it's not unexpected to enter a room and be the only woman, or enter a room and be the only one who wears a color. Right now I have a black shirt on, but you get the picture. And
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
even surprised by it. I just take it for granted. And when I got the opportunity to also set up a team for the GPT-NL project,
Mm-hmm.
it was not one of the first things on my mind to take into account that we should have a diverse team. It sounds really bad, but I just, yeah, well, we need this person. Oh, I know this person, and here
Yeah.
and there. And we were in a hurry. And before we knew it, we had an 80% male team.
Yeah.
And I did not, and I feel sorry for that. I did not even realize that we were just focused and running, and this is something that can happen quite easily. And then there was somebody in my team who felt comfortable enough to raise her hand and say, "Hey, wait a minute. Where's the female colleagues? Because we have her, and why did we not ask them, or why weren't they approached, or
Mm-hmm.
what's happening here?" And then I was dumbstruck, like, oh, why did I not even consider this? Why did I not see this? And I think this really goes to show that even if you are convinced that diversity is a good thing, and even if you're convinced that we should promote women in the busy everyday lives that we have, you might forget it. So
Yeah.
it's so important to keep each other awake and really ask these questions, and make sure that you create a safe and comfortable space where these questions can be asked.
Yeah, that's
But it,
important.
it is difficult, and I for myself, I've had a lot of opportunities, fortunately, and very supportive people around me.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I can see that I've also internalized some biases myself, and that's quite shocking to see, but that's the way it is. And the only way to go forward is by acknowledging that and having a conversation about it. Another thing that happened to me was when we were looking for a board member or representative
Mhm.
in an ethics committee. And there we set the goal that we wanted to have a fair representation of all genders. And I approached a contact of mine and I told her that we need to have a diverse board and we would very much like to have a female member in that board. And then she also responded with, well, I'm sorry, I don't want to be asked because I'm a woman. I want to be asked because I'm an expert. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't appreciate you reaching out to me like this. And then I reread the email. It's like, oh dear, the way I phrased this was completely off and wrong. And oh dear. And I got back in touch with her and we had a very nice conversation about it. So it's also a matter of learning and making mistakes and not being too afraid of making mistakes. I think if your intention is right, most people will
Mhm.
recognize that, but you will make mistakes,
Of course.
and don't be too afraid of that.
And maybe we will make mistake on every step we take, but we have to be aware of that.
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely. And Saskia, thank you for sharing your insights. And to wrap up, there any final thoughts you'd like to share with the participants, and or anything you're especially excited about to work in the upcoming months?
Hmm. Well, I'm especially excited for the upcoming months in getting a little bit further with the developments of some of the models, especially GPT-NL. We're going to start training somewhere next summer. It will take some time, but we've developed a lot of protocols. We've come quite far in our thinking about how to approach the legislative context. And I'm really proud of the team. And some of the first data sets that are lawfully acquired are starting to stream into our storage systems, and that just makes me feel incredibly proud. And I'm very curious to see how much more we can get and how we can also enlarge that ecosystem and share the lessons learned with other initiatives. So
Mm-hmm.
that is something I'm quite excited about. And I'm also very excited about the TrustLLM project and
Mm-hmm.
the use cases there because I do believe you need to ground technological innovation in a real world context, but getting that off the ground is also quite complicated and
Yeah.
convincing external stakeholders to join in and to phrase something in such a way that it can flow back into research. And it's been challenging to get that off the ground. And we're starting to slowly see the very first steps there. And I'm excited to see what 2025 will bring because I think there we will bring that a lot further and it will become more and more concrete. But that will be very exciting as well.
I agree with you, but before 2025, we need a little bit of break, so we will have enough strength to finish all the works that we are starting this year. And with this question, we have finished the like official part of the web cafe. So I invite the participants to ask a questions or to raise their hands if they want to speak. Don't be shy. Maybe to wait 10 seconds more.
Curious, where is everyone working? Are you all involved with the Eloquence project, or I see Trina from TrustLLM?
Yeah. And we have several colleagues from the MDPI, the institute. Okay, if there is no questions, thank you all for joining, and thank you, Saskia, for this web cafe. At first for participation and then for sharing your story. I hope that this will have some impact since we are going to share this web cafe on our official website and also on YouTube channel of Eloquence. Oh, we have one question. No, not a question. This was very educational, I think, for all participants. Thank you. Thank you too. It's anonymous, so I can't really say thank you to some certain uh, person. Okay, I think that's it. Okay. So that's it. Thank you all for joining and have a good afternoon and have a good rest after this.
Yeah, happy holidays to everyone. Thank you so much. And thank you, Nirvana, for hosting this.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.